I'm Jacob Lichting. I work for a studio called SystemEra Software, which was founded 2 or 3 years ago. I'm the lead designer on that project, and I'm talking to the Cobra TV guys. Internally, we call it Zeitgeist, a space game Zeitgeist, and a lot of that has to do with just real things happening in the space industry world. People or companies going to companies like SpaceX doing actual commercial space travel or working towards it, and actually developing new technologies that we haven't seen before.
Wow.
And then that's driven some popular culture movies. There's been Interstellar, there's been The Martian, and those have been actually good movies.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I agree with you. Whose idea was it to start this game?
So the idea was initially one of our artists, Adam Brommel's. He had this concept for a space game where you're a lonely astronaut off on a distant world with little or no communication back to Earth. And he also kind of pioneered the low poly look that we're going with now. Yeah.
Okay. And where are you guys based out of?
So a few of us are here in Seattle. I'm one of them. Adam is in Toronto along with another one of our programmers, and we have a guy in Salt Lake City.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so we're spread around. We'll fly each other out every once in a while, and you need that to kind of get more high bandwidth discussions going. But overall, I think it works pretty well.
What other games have you worked on in the past?
So personally, I worked on I'm actually relatively new on the team to the industry compared to I'm the youngest, I think, on the team. And so actually the only games I've worked on professionally are the Halo franchise. So I was at 343 Industries for a while. Collectively, we run a pretty big swath of the AAA gamut. There's Assassin's Creed, there's some Valve games, a guy from Oculus, Disney. Yeah, so quite a few.
Oh, that's good. Do you have other games with your company, or this is the first one? And it's your company's SystemEra Softworks, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is our first game as a company, which has been that's been a challenge. If you start out in the game industry and you haven't made a game yet as a company, there's lots of like financial hurdles there. There's marketing hurdles, and yeah, it's been a challenge. We hope that our game, as opposed to a lot of other sci-fi genre video games, is inspired by actual aerospace. And so there's definitely the movies. And so we like to think that we can be more inspired by The Martian and like Apollo 13 versus like Star Wars, for example.
I see.
Yeah. So more based in reality and the science of
we
saying
get
aerospace.
science fiction liberties as we possibly as you possibly can, but I mean there's something to be said about like the real science of things and the real feeling of exploration that you get when you're traveling to real places, and we're trying to hit on a lot of that. So I worked a lot early on the terrain engine for the project, and I don't know if it's all scientifically accurate. But to the extent that we can, we try to like look at the way that real rock layers are formed and try to use it mostly as an artistic inspiration. And if it happens to fall into some sort of scientific grounding, then that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, I find the terrain really interesting because I work in the engineering industry and I work with digital surfaces all the time, tin surfaces, right?
Yeah.
And I can see that. I can see the terrain moving, and when you guys in the game, you're shaping the ground, you're terraforming it. In my head, I can visualize exactly what's happening there, and I find it really cool. And I get that from Astroneer, but that I don't necessarily get that same feeling from a lot of other games that, do the terraforming and things like that. And there's not very many of them actually, but
yeah,
it's really interesting.
Yeah, one thing we've focused on a lot there is the plants and rocks in the world. So they're stuck in the ground, and as you dig up the terrain, it just calculates, have I been dug up yet? And then when it does, it frees itself and it like tumbles around, and so like picking up the surface items tends to be really satisfying. And then of course you can dig and dig and dig down to the core if you want or whatever, and yeah,
that's really cool.
And there's caves down there, right?
Mm-hmm. There are, yeah. So there's I remember when I played Minecraft for the first time, you don't expect, like, when you dig straight down that there's going to be something there.
Yeah.
And that's like one of the big moments there is like when you finally hit like a cave, and you're like, I thought I was just like breaking the game by digging this deep, you know?
Yeah.
And then you hit something, and then that's like a really, really satisfying moment.
Yeah, it was really cool. I was watching one of your playthroughs on your channel, and you were digging down to find a cave.
Yeah.
And you came across an opening. And what was really cool about it for me is that you were afraid to keep walking. You wanted to find the beginning of it, so that way you didn't just walk off and die.
Right.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, part of that's there's, depending on what your survival situation is, you kind of got to keep tabs on where you're at.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was what that was about.
So, premature question here. I don't know if it's later on down than the notes here. What happens when you die?
When you die, it's just basic respawn. You'll lose your items that you were carrying with you, but it's an appropriate level of punishment, so you don't want to die, obviously, but but it's not going to like end the game or anything.
Okay.
Yeah. So no, we don't procedurally generate the music from scratch or anything. It's all composed by a fellow named Machine Fabrique, which you can find him on one of our Twitter posts.
Okay.
But we're doing, I don't know if you call it procedural, but it's a dynamic kind of music system, I guess you could say. So specifically when we were working with him, we had him layer usually five different tracks together. So it'll start off with this bass, very ambient, almost unnoticeable track that's just kind of very pleasant in the background. As events happen in the world, we kind of like crank up this knob from like 1 to 5, and then like slowly crank it back down. And so something eventful happens, and then that just like that the music will reinforce the intensity of that moment until it falls back down. And since each track is composed from the ground up like that, I think it's a really neat.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I've always complained about in games. They never get the music right. It's either too loud or it's annoying. It doesn't fit the experience. And when I said I could barely hear it, wasn't a bad thing. It made the environment, feel so much more. It was more enjoyable.
Yeah. No, I think our sound guy Riley could go on like for hours and hours about that exact thing, because every sound that you hear, including the music, has to all fit together,
right,
and support the visuals without like overwhelming the listener,
So the next question I got for you is how the planets are generated. How are they Are they procedurally generated?
They are. They're what we're calling a designed procedural. We design them at the level of biomes, and so a biome is a design space where we've picked out the elements that are going to go into the biome, and a lot of those are design decisions as well as artistic ones. So this set of decorators and this collection of rocks and this kind of terrain feature, but then after that happens, we just throw it to the random generator, and then that generates the planet that you'll actually get. And so you can think of it like you will never have a map that where things are, and so when you play it, every single playthrough, it'll be a different map, but each of these biomes are fully intentional. And most that's for design reasons. We want each of them to support the gameplay loop and not be like substantially over difficult or too easy for the player.
Okay.
And so it's with procedural generation, it's about keeping the bounds on the random generator the correct size. Because if you push it too far, then you might just get things that are not even interesting or are just too difficult.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So, when I'm watching, some of your videos on YouTube, it seems like the whole terrain, it's not only all destructible, or meaning you could deform it, but you could actually use that terrain that you're digging to create structures.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so when you use your deform tool to dig a hole in the ground, that dirt is actually just becomes a resource.
Wow.
And we can use those resources in actual like crafting recipes, for example. Maybe dirt isn't a very valuable resource. Maybe if you were gonna like sell it for something more valuable, it would be like a really low ratio or something. But yeah, you collect it first, and then that's how you add it back into the world.
Does the game center around exploration? Like, how far does that go?
it goes about as far as the content we can make for it, I think. And so each planet will offer its own set of unique challenges that you won't find on like other planets. And so, especially with all the hazards, the survival hazards that we have in the game, a lot of those are specifically unique to planets. But then hidden behind a lot of those hazards are unique rewards. And we're not saying exactly what's behind those hazards. We don't want to tell people exactly what they're going to find. That would ruin the exploration aspect of it a little bit. But yeah, players are meant to believe that there's something much more interesting around the next corner, and then they're meant to eventually go out and find it.
So, in respect to the planets, then, like what size are you talking about here? How big is the average planet?
The planets we're generating right now are maybe like 5 miles around. And I don't know if we'll really go much bigger. And a lot of people playing these kinds of games might complain that, oh, that's not realistic. Like the Earth is 24,000 miles around. Like you're telling me that I'm supposed to believe this is a planet. But it's more for us about giving the narrative of what a planet is. And so, I mean, in many games, they'll slow down the day-night cycle just because you don't want to play a game for 24 hours.
Right.
And we don't want people to spend, 80 days to go around the Earth because they're not playing the game for 80 days. And so it should be, if you can circumnavigate the whole planet, and it will take you some time, but it's actually achievable in the game. And so setting that as the correct size, I think, is important.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, the game is about resource extraction and building. So when you go out into the world when you explore into the world and find new unique items or even just regular resources, the game is about how to best design your equipment and how to best pick what to bring with you in order to bring those resources back to your base. To craft new items, to go ever further out into the world or to other planets. And so everything in the game has a appropriate resource cost. And so initially resources will be used to help you just survive at all.
Okay.
But once you've kind of surpassed the survival threshold and everything is easier, then it's about going further out into your solar system or the galaxy.
Okay.
And so it's all tiered like that. So like spaceships are much more expensive than building simple survival like tents and or even like rovers. And then the bigger you build up, you can build up more expensive equipment, and that kind of feeds into the next level of gameplay every time.
Okay. I've seen in one of your videos that the spaceships are kind of like an autopilot. Is that how it's going to be in the final game?
It will definitely be that way for our first release. And
Okay.
the reasoning behind that is that we want people to actually make it to the adjacent planet or moon on the first play, and we don't want to gate them away from that with like a complex like piloting mechanic. And so eventually we will definitely have piloted spaceships, but think of it like that your spaceship comes default with an autopilot.
Right.
And that will be the initial experience that we deliver on day one. And then over time, as we keep on developing the game, we'll add in the ability to turn off that autopilot and go exactly where you want to. But I mean, in real spaceflight, if you're planning a mission to Mars, like it's all planned out, and the people back at ground control have an exact path that you're going to take.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So to the astronauts on board, it's just a matter of like, oh, where are we on this timeline from 0 to however many hours, right? And so
I can see your stance.
we'll start there, and then we'll definitely see, because I mean the game is also very much about like building unique spaceships. You start with your default spaceship, but then you can heavily customize it, or even eventually craft your own spaceship that you've designed. But we'll work into that.
And you mentioned that you said explore the rest of the galaxy. So this game is a galaxy then.
It will eventually be a galaxy. Well, I'll say. So initially, we'll probably start people out just in their own solar system.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the reasoning behind that is just like getting that just small experience, much like as refined as we can.
Right.
And so on day one, it'll be co-op multiplayer within your solar system.
Okay.
And the idea is to eventually work that into the ability for players to leave their own galaxy, which is like a hosted system that you can run on a dedicated server or just your own PC and invite your friends.
I see.
And when you leave your solar system, it's almost like you're entering the matchmaking service that we will eventually set up. And so like a solar system is a good unit to like just get the synchronous multiplayer really solid. And then eventually we explore like what it looks like to expend huge amounts of resources to build the spaceship that you need to visit your neighboring galaxy, and that's when we open up the multiplayer with strangers.
Okay. Wow. That sounds interesting. You said that there was weather effects on the planets too, so that's a danger, right?
Definitely. And so probably the earliest hazard that we made with weather was the sandstorm, which we showed off in our patents build. And the sandstorm are procedurally placed very large hazards that kind of roam across the planet's surface. And so in many cases, hazards kind of offer a danger as well as a reward if you can handle it correctly. So in the case of a sandstorm, it's high winds, maybe you can gather more power from that, but maybe you need to build up the kind of wind generator that can actually harvest it without just getting blown away, you know?
Right.
But on the surface, if you see a sandstorm coming, you should probably do something quickly to shield yourself from it. And I think there'll be a lot of weather things like that.
Okay. What about other dangers like NPCs in the game? Or alien life of any kind?
Right. So alien life in the game will be not as sentient as humans. So
Okay.
this is not a game about going out and shooting space aliens.
Right.
The game actually has no weapons.
Okay.
But there are dangers that you can handle with the tools that you've been given, but it will never be by shooting them with a gun.
Right.
And so that can range from strange and alien plant life that attacks you when you get close, or you have to like work around or dig your way around.
Yeah.
But we're keeping the NPCs, if there are NPCs, they're sort of simple-minded and sort of not the intention is not to have them come at you with like a vicious face.
So you're more or less going after kind of a realistic approach, an environmental approach to this game.
Yeah. I think we haven't as a species we haven't actually discovered any other species in space, and so we do have life on the planets. There are plants and even small animals. Definitely starting with the environmental aspect, because space travel is interesting enough, and it's dangerous enough.
Right.
We should be able to reference the reality of space travel forever and find lots of interesting gameplay opportunities without having to resort to like combat.
Right. So earlier, it's starting to settle in earlier on when you mentioned the Martian, and how well that relates to the Astroneer.
Yeah. No. When I read that book for the first time, it felt like I was reading a manual for how to make cool space game design. He's always doing like resource management and like going out and finding unique items that help him survive. It just reads very much like what you would think of as a really interesting game. And if we didn't steal all the ideas, but man, it was very, very inspiring.
Yeah. So you're going to be adding some like multiplayer with strangers later on.
Yeah.
Are you guys trying to there's a lot of people out there that like to troll people, grief people, and there's people out there that don't like that at all.
Yeah.
With the tools that you do provide, are they troll free or grief free, or can you still do things to other people?
Yeah, so making a game completely troll free is
possible.
But it's definitely a noble goal, and I think a lot of games should strive to do that. Because you want, especially when young people get on and play a video game online, you don't want them to have a horrible experience. You don't want their their first impression of an online game to be awful. You want it to be pleasant. That's why they're playing the game in the first place. And so to the extent that we can, we want the game mechanics to incentivize cooperation and good behavior rather than immediately giving people a weapon that they're going to use to hurt somebody. Yeah. There's no way we can completely get rid of people's griefing desires. But if you can't get rid of the desire, you have to incentivize, and you have to make good gameplay opportunities to cooperate, and you have to make people want to cooperate with your design. And obviously the game that did this very, very well was Journey.
Journey. I was going to say that. Yeah. So going back to some of the gameplay mechanics, is there like a survival element like eating and drinking?
So day one, there's no hunger bar.
Okay.
But that will definitely be something that we'll explore. I mean, our game screams farming at some point, and we probably won't have farming on day one. Actually, we won't have farming on day one, but that seems like a very obvious way to go. And so you can think of like there's different levels of survival games, and I think actually some current survival games do this where they have like the basic survival mode where that doesn't include hunger, and then you can select, if you want the hardcore survival mode, that includes like these 20 other parameters that you have to like juggle all at once, and we can kind of tier that up as we go for the more hardcore audience if that's what they give us feedback on.
Story or lore? Is there a story or lore to why you're there, why you spawned on that planet?
There definitely is.
Okay.
It's definitely not a linear story by any means, but we kind of always have these lunchtime discussions about what's really going on in the Astroneer universe, and so we have all these ideas that we've kind of hinted that we're going to be hinting at with the initial release, and of course we'll continue to build that out as we go. But there's definitely a narrative to the Astroneer universe that will continue to build up over time, and so initially we're a sandbox survival game,
right?
But there's no reason that some update sometime in the future you just come across naturally the same way you would normally be exploring. You come across some very unique item and you notice, like, I've never seen anything like this before.
Yeah.
What does this mean? And that kind of leads you through even like mini linear experiences or a full linear experience. But like we can just decide that we don't have to even announce it. It just becomes part of the larger universe. And I think that would be really neat.
One of the things I think is cool about games that do not have stories is that, just simply by you playing it creates a story for you. You are that player. You fell down that cave. You had to dig your way out of it. You got, I don't know, poisoned by a plant on your way out. You found something cool down there. It's like after you're done playing for about an hour, you do have a story.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's not a story. It has no dialogue. There's no audio content. Yeah. There's no like individual pieces of thing that were crafted for this point in the story. But yeah, definitely. I think that's the strength of these kinds of games, especially with multiplayer. When something happened and your friend came along and helped you out, or then you have multiple characters in the story, right. And that's when it gets really interesting.
Yeah, I totally agree, 100%. So as far as the artistic style for Astroneer versus say Planet Nomads or any other type of space type survival game out there, what is going to set it apart from them?
Well, I think all these other games are going to be excellent. And we don't try to necessarily set ourselves apart, like specifically. We kind of just try to do our own thing, and play on good game design principles and do all that stuff. But I think specifically what our strong points for us are the third person aspect is, I think, pretty unique. Third person survival is pretty unique. And that's been like an interesting design space for us to explore. Especially when you can you can add animations specifically to help indicate certain survival things, right? So if you're in first person, how can you know how much oxygen you have? Well, you need a HUD.
I see.
Like, how can you know if your health is low? You need to just add another HUD element. But since we're in third person, it actually gives us an opportunity to just display through animation and sound design.
Right on the back of the backpack, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that's amazing.
Yeah. And what's cool about that is like you can. It's almost oxymoronic. Like the player can get a more intimate sense of his own character because he can always see him on the screen.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting. And so we're trying to really play on that aspect of it as much as we can.
I see. And Steam Early Access, when is that going to be exactly?
So what we said is late summer, early fall. And we'll announce the exact date in due time, I think, yeah.
Okay. And are you guys doing like any type of Kickstarter?
No, I think we were, I don't want to say we were lucky enough to avoid having to do a Kickstarter. I can explain why that would be. But yeah, we have not done a Kickstarter. No. Yeah, it creates too much of an expectation. Yeah, I think that was our biggest reason to not want to do a Kickstarter is that it creates like definitely too much pressure, right? Like you get like 100,000 people who are just like all these demands on your game now, and you definitely want to listen to feedback. That's like the goal of being a game designer,
right?
But I think if you talk to a lot of the devs who have done Kickstarters, it's just so much work.
Kind of feel like you're anchored to everybody's opinions at that point, and that you might have to let them control the process of the game.
Yeah, exactly. Like you definitely want to listen to people's, like, especially people's complaints about the game, but not necessarily listen to their solutions.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Oh, I get you. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of the game designer struggle a lot of the time, and so and that's kind of why Kickstarter is sort of dangerous. Besides, like, maybe it's actually impossible to fill the reward tiers that you thought you could fulfill.
Yeah.
And that becomes very difficult. So I think Kickstarter as a funding source for games, obviously it has opened up the possibility of funding at all for tons of projects. But for us, like, being able to just get privately funded with the expectation that we're going to make the right decisions and that we're going to collect feedback on our own time has been good for us.
Yeah, I think that, Kickstarter and stuff like that is actually trending into a very negative area.
Yeah.
Due to some of the developers that have used and abused that system.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
All right. So here's the big question: platform goals.
Mm-hmm.
So PC only, or are we talking consoles maybe?
So the current plans is to release first on Steam Early Access.
Right.
We absolutely want to be on consoles, and I think we want to be on consoles earlier rather than later.
Okay.
And you kind of get a different audience with consoles, and that's an audience that you also want to pay attention to,
right,
and help you develop the game. So we have no announced plans for consoles, but that's something that we definitely want to do.
And I think this is a good time too, especially with Microsoft and Sony paying extra attention to indie devs.
Yeah, so many good indie titles, even on console, doing and from what I hear, doing very well on console.
Yeah, I agree. What is your ultimate goal for Astroneer? the master child. Not what's and you don't have this. You could talk freely. This isn't anything set in stone. This is your wish list on what the final product will look like.
I expect hordes of people with pitchforks coming after me if we never make what I'm about to say. No, I would love to see Astroneer be a global game, a game that you can get on. You log in you download Astroneer for the first time, maybe even after it's been initially popular for a while, and you're like, okay, what's this game people are talking about? And you can be at any age, you can be of any demographic, and you don't pop the disc in anymore or whatever. That's not, you download the game for the first time and you open it up, and no matter who you are, it's accessible to you, and it's able to give you the themed experience that we're shooting for with space exploration, and like the feeling of wonder about like what's out there in the universe. What can I discover there? Who can I meet there? And when you do meet people, it's not this awful online experience that you get with a lot of games.
Yeah.
And
There's a person. Shoot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You shoot first, ask questions later. No, how about cooperate first, because that's helpful to you.
Right.
And when you run across somebody, they can be somebody from another country who speaks a different language from you, and that also, just through the game's mechanic, is not a barrier to you to interact and cooperate with somebody. And that there can be this universe that has such strong themes, and it's just strong themes that people are interested in as well. That kind of brings people together like that. I would be happy that if we could do that.
Okay, that's awesome. Good to hear, man.
No Man's Sky has done so much to bring people into the genre. Like when people see it for the first time, they kind of immediately get what the possibilities are.
Right.
They kind of immediately get that, oh, the way that game should work is that I can just like go anywhere. And that doesn't just mean anywhere in this room or anywhere in this city or on this land. I can go anywhere.
Right.
And I think that's what's really cool about that game.
And what you're trying to achieve is something completely different. It's, No Man's Sky is you're going from planet to planet. What life could you see? What animals? What could possibly kill you? And things like that. But yours, like you said before, and I'm going to say it again, it's like The Martian. It's like you're out there and you have to build and survive.
Yeah, I think our game is fundamentally about resourcefulness, kind of like I was saying about like being creative with what you have,
right,
in order to survive. And so the creativity aspect of the game is very important to us. So the fact that you can build up a shelter with the terrain, and it'll be there when you get back. And you can save that off, or you can make creations and like share them with your friends, and also have that be in a universe. I think that's what's really cool for us.
Yeah, definitely. When I was a child, we didn't have any of this. We had like Atari. There really wasn't much to offer, and our imaginations went right to the sky.
Right.
And nowadays, there's these games like your game that actually put you in space. And it's just amazing to be able to finally be there. Yeah,
like what we're trying to avoid, like the plague, is like throwing you into this world that is completely obscure to you and completely inaccessible, and then like requiring you to learn like this huge set of like nuanced mechanics just to do anything. We kind of want to make it an experience that anybody, even people playing for the first time, can at least do the initial stuff, and then like we draw people into the more complicated things over time, but it's always like drawing them out and inspiring them to learn something new or to be more creative, to do the next thing rather than requiring or gating them off, Jacob,
thank you so much for coming on Cobra TV. Anybody who's interested in the game, I'm going to link Jacob's actual, you got a developer channel, right?
Oh, you mean on Twitch?
On YouTube.
Oh yeah, we've got our YouTube, which we'll post developer playthrough sometime. We have a Twitch that we'll do developer streaming.
Awesome, sometime. And dude, I look forward to playing your game, and I think a lot of people will as well.
Right, yeah, that's always good to hear. I mean, it's every once in a while you're in late at the office and you forget that the real world exists and that people are really, really excited.
Yeah, very excited. Yeah,
that's good to hear.